Well, again, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. We're excited to have you for our alumni career webinar, Why is Teaming So Hard? Because you might not really be on a team. My name is Jeff Murphy. I'm a member of the Alumni Career Engagement Team in the Office of Alumni Relations at the university. Today's webinar is offered to our 366,000 alumni around the globe, and of course, all of our current students. Throughout your career, BU is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals. And we aim to do this by providing everyone with access to a series of valuable online tools and social media communities. Again, we've got folks joining us from some very far away places around the world. Please know that we really do appreciate your participation in this and every program that we offer. Before I introduce today's speaker, a couple housekeeping notes for you. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be made available for on-demand viewing on the BU Alumni and Friends website, which you can find at www.bu.edu/alumni. I'm also going to go ahead and just email everybody a link to the recording when this is over as well. Our speaker today is very eager to answer all of your questions that you have, and you're welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the Q&A function. So similar to the chat that you opened up, there's another option just to submit your question. Go ahead, open that up, type in your question at any point, and we're going to make sure that we save some time at the end to get through all of those. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day, BU Questrom School of Business MBA alum, Ben Tarshis. Ben works with leaders to reimagine what is possible for their current and future people. New ways of working, strengthened cultures, and innovative experiences that help people thrive and businesses to perform. Ben has been tasked with designing leading edge human capital services, executing leaders' visions, building bridges to the broader organization, and solving clients' most important problems. Through his work, Ben has developed a reputation as a design and innovation expert, a leader who is comfortable navigating ambiguous situations, and someone who has curiosity to solve complex and strategic problems. Prior to his consulting work, Ben spent time in the nonprofit space, both with AmeriCorps and the Center for Creative Leadership. And in addition to Ben's BU MBA, he also holds a Bachelor of Arts from Tufts University. Ben, super excited for your session. We've been looking forward to it for a long time. Thank you so much for doing it for us. Why don't you go ahead, share your slides that you've got for everybody here today, and then the floor will be all yours.
Thank you so much, Jeff. It is an absolute pleasure to be here. And give me 1 second for technology to catch up with me as I share my screen. Awesome, thank you. And humbled that so many people from across the alumni community and world are here to talk about teaming and listen to me. So I hope that we are not wasting your time at all. But we're here to talk about teaming and why it's hard, and maybe understanding, well, what are we on or at work? So Jeff gave me a very perhaps undeserved professional introduction. I'm going to give a personal introduction because who we are outside of work is always the most important thing. This is my family. This is my wife, Liz, my oldest, Jack, my middle, Charlie, my youngest, Vivian. I share them because I will undoubtedly tell stories about them in this lecture. And when I call Jeff Jack, it is not a microaggression. It's just I cannot remember anybody's name beyond those who are in my house at all time. So thank you in advance. So what are we going to do today? We're gonna talk about some group dynamics and working norm concepts. We're going to discuss some common sources of tension. We're going to offer strategies for improvement, and we're going to do a little Q&A. Unfortunately, due to our technology, I can't see your faces as you do Q&A, but as Jeff said, pop it in the chat, and Jeff is going to share what those questions are as they come together. So please feel free to ask and interrupt as we're going on, and let's try to make this as dynamic as possible. So let's start with this. A place to start. Groups do not become teams simply because it is what we call them. The entire workforce of any large and complex organization is never a team. But think how often that platitude is offered up. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful place to start. And I am borrowing the words of John Katzenbach and Douglas Smith. John Katzenbach, I had the pleasure of being a colleague of his at PwC in the Katzenbach Center for Cultural and Teaming Excellence. So not only did I read his book, and many of you who are BU alums certainly read parts of this article, but I got to learn from him directly and hear him probably say this more than one time or not. But think about this, right? A team is never a team simply because we call it just that. But think about how often this platitude is offered up. And so what we're going to do today is really focus on this word team. And what I love about this quote from this isn't a new quote. This quote is almost 25 years old. This is from The Wisdom of Teams. It was published in 1993. So think how prescient Katzenbach and Smith were 25 plus years ago. And think perhaps how much overused the word team is, but we don't really know what it means. So that's what I do. I work with colleagues to figure out, my clients to figure out, well, what is team and what are some alternatives we can use? Because a lot of sources of our problem at work are around team. So let's think about some alternatives. So one alternative I used and didn't work out is colleagues, right? It's a little too hard. It maybe works in law firms. It works in old school financial organizations, but it's not quite right. The other term we've experimented with is friends, and sometimes it works, but like the middle baron with Goldilocks, it's a little too soft. We've tried people that I make more money than. Also doesn't work, and given this really weird job climate that we're in, the people who are reporting to you might make more money than you because they just jumped jobs 3 times and somehow manufactured a 40% raise. So good on them and maybe bad on you. And then I've tried humans to come to the office 3 days a week, but I forget your name because there aren't nameplates in real life like on Zoom. And that has felt a little too real as I've looked at people and said, oh my God, you are taller than I think you are, but I'm not sure who you are. So in many ways, we're just stuck with Teams. We're stuck with Teams, and Bill Gates and Microsoft did us no favor by making it the collaboration platform du jour and calling it Teams. But that still begs the question, what is a team and what does it mean? So we can go to the dictionary. We can go to the dictionary, and Webster Merriam, they don't offer up a lot of love. They say a team is a group of people that work together. So, well, that's a place to start. But again, perhaps our source of tension. They also say a team is a number of horses that are pulling something. And if we extrapolate a little bit too much, we say, ooh, that is not an analogy that I feel like, particularly as I'm working amongst my team at work. So let me share a definition that I use with my clients, and something that I think has provided a lot of clarity with what we can do and what it means to team in the workplace. Teams exist for specific reasons and have specific supporting structures. A real team is a small group of people with complementary skills who are committed to a shared purpose, who succeed or fail together, and hold one another mutually accountable. So we have specific reason, we have structure, smallness of size, complementary skills, a shared purpose, who succeed or fail together and hold each other accountable. So what I love about this definition, and again, this is working and building on the works of John Katzenbach and have been applied in my own work with clients over time, is that teams exist to do something. Teams don't exist in perpetuity. They exist to do something. There's a time, they're time or goal bound. Teams do not exist in perpetuity. And that's something that they do is not a business as usual activity. So if you're working around in business as usual activities, you're probably not part of a team. Teams are small, right? If it's bigger than 8 or 10 people, you're no longer on a team. Because think about what needs to happen. If you're going to have a shared purpose, be accountable for one another, succeed or fail together, you can't be more than 8 or 10. If you're 12 or 14, you're going to become minor factions of 6 or 7. And those will succeed and fail together or compete against each other, right? So teams are time bound, they're size bound. Teams need to have complementary skills, right? If you have the same skill set all the time, you're just going to be a bunch of yes people. You're not going to see a problem from all sides. You need complementary skills. You need quants. You need creatives. You need everything, and you need everything and anything in between. Again, teams have shared purposes because if you're accomplishing something, it's time bound, it's existing for a specific reason, so you can succeed and fail together. And most importantly, teams hold each other individually and mutually accountable for their shared success or their shared failures, right? If teams do not exist, so Jeff, for example, can do something wrong and I can blame him for not doing it. If we don't hit our results, Jeff and I do not hit our results. It's not I, it's we. Again, there's every middle school athletic shirt, you probably said there's no I in team, and there's only a we in team, and it is cliche, but it is correct, right? We have to hold each other mutually accountable together. So with that, I'm going to pose a question. We're going to open up the channel, and Jeff's going to pop something up. And we're going to ask, who is on a real team? You can say, I am 100% on a real team based on the definition that we shared. I am not on a team. Or third, because you're BU alums and you're the smartest alumni in the greater Boston area, you might say that this feels like a trick question, so I'm not going to answer just yet.
I'm going to tell Tufts that you said that about the BU alumni.
Well, you know,
I always do this to my presenters. Ben, if you had to make a guess on where our audience is going to land on this, do you have a thought on what people are going to say?
Oh, I think 10% are going to be on a real team, 20% not on a team, and the remaining 70 are going to be, I think it's a trick question.
So you think people will tell you they're not on a real team?
I think 20% of respondents at least are going to tell me that we're not on a real team.
Well, surprise. Let me share this with you. Can you see the result?
Oh, I was way off. And I am surprised that so many of you think that you are on a team. And so either you have wonderful places to work and you have figured you are not going to be future clients, because people that answer that high, usually I don't get to work with. Sadly, as consultants, we kind of only show up when there are problems. But we're gonna figure this out. So I'm going to close this down. Thanks, Jeff. So we'll come back to this later on. So if not a real team, then what? So typically there are three big buckets of collaboration or groups that show up at work. And what is remiss here is the individual contributor or sole operator. And yes, if you're lucky enough to be just that, then that's what you are. So you're sort of bucket number 4, way the heck off the screen. So we've talked about real teams, and real teams exist for solving the hardest and most complex problems. Everything that they do is a collective output. There are no individual outputs on a team. They are all about a group work. The second one, and this is maybe where a lot of you really reside, are working groups. Working groups are all about efficiency. Working groups can exist in perpetuity. They exist for the sole purposes of assigning work, sharing information, and then ultimately completing tasks as an individual and maybe reporting results or findings back. And then the worst of all possible world is this thing called team in name only, where we say that essentially, you know what a team in name only is, and that's where we have a leader say, team, let's get to work. These are people that typically lack emotional commitment to one another. Doesn't mean that they don't like each other outside of work, but in work they lack emotional commitment, and they really don't know how and why they're supposed to collaborate. So let's bring this double click, as we like to say, a little bit more. So what is the type of work that a real team is going to do? It's that new project, that new problem, something that has never been solved. When you're on a team, what do you need from your colleagues and members of that team? It's an intellectual partnership. And what really makes things soar is this thing around emotional commitment that says, not only am I committed to our results, I'm committed to your development in getting our results. Leadership responsibilities, yes, is there going to be a leader, but those leadership responsibilities can be fluid and distributed among members, among meetings, about who is most equipped to lead this part of the problem, when and where. And guess what? Emotional investment, it's really high, because doing all these things, it takes time, it takes energy. And if you think about how can you do this in perpetuity, it's why you can't, because you'll get too tired. Working groups are all around business as usual. It's about routine. The primary purpose of a working group is around information sharing. Typically working groups are going to have a very well-defined leader She or he is going to have a very well-defined role, and they're going to orchestrate the sharing of information, whether that is in meetings or outside of meetings. And the emotional investment required to be in a high-functioning working group, it's not very high at all. It doesn't mean, and I can't stress this enough, it doesn't mean that you can't be friends, colleagues, even married to members of a working group at work. It just means that your emotional stakes in the game, because you're just sort of keeping that ball spinning on your finger, they should be low. And then team in name only. What's the work time? We don't know. What do you need from your colleagues? You don't know, but you can be darn sure you're not getting it. The leadership requirements, there might be an appointed leader, but she or he lacks those formal leadership skills and is not doing a good job of creating the experience. The emotional investment is low. The emotional toll is high. So we can take this one step further. So what does a real team look like? Because when we get into these aspects of relationships at work, it can become that ultimate, I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it type situation. So what does a real team look like? A real team looks like people in a conference room over a whiteboard. Sometimes they're yelling at each other. They're yelling at each other because they're so passionate about what they're trying to do, and they're working with each other. And you can see they might be yelling at each other, but there's a smile on their face. It's one of passion, not of anger. And they're figuring it out together because they're saying, no, this is the way to solve the problem. No, this is the way to solve the problem. Like, wait a minute. I hear column A, column B. Together we can come column C. And then they immediately sort of change on a dime and say, oh, I get it now. And that can be the way forward. What does a working group look like? A working group looks like a well-executed 5-minute stand-up that might end in 4 minutes and 37 seconds. It is all about efficiency. It is all about making sure we have the information that we need to do to run our job. And it is agile with a capital A. If you have employed agile at your organization where you work, you are operating in agile groups and pods and working groups, whatever the case may be. What's a team in name only? Team in name only is still wrapping up their 9:30 5-minute stand-up. It's the 90-minute to 3-hour 5-minute stand-up that happens every day, that people are passively and rolling their eyes at all times. And you have a manager who is not prepared for the meeting. There's no agenda, there's no structure, and people cannot wait to get out so they can say at 5 o'clock, I'm so glad I'm done with meetings. Now I can actually do my work. If you ever have days like that, you have days upon days upon days, you for sure are on a team in name only. I'm going to share a story that interests me. I don't see your faces, so it's hard to know. So I went to the dentist on Tuesday, happy to report that I was cavity free. My dentists were Tufts graduates, not BU dental school graduates. So I did have a bit of alumni pride there. But when I got there at 9:30, I saw the tail end of their working group stand-up. It was the most fascinating thing that I'd ever seen, because typically as a consultant, I'm helping clients employ these or do that, but I saw it. And they went around. I got there, it was a 9:30 appointment. I got there at 9:20 because it was new dentist. So I knew I had to have paperwork, but they weren't ready. They weren't open yet. They were running their stand-up, and I saw there was a well-identified speaker. They're running through and say, here are the patients for the day. Here's going to see Dr. Dan, who's going to see Dr. Shen. And I went through what everything is happening. And then you heard, okay, this is actually have a big complicated root canal. Who can help out on the root canal? There are swapping schedules, and they say, wait a minute, who wants to go to lunch this way? And it was phenomenal. It was done with efficiency. It was done with collegiality. And it was done in a way that as a practitioner said, wow, that is really, really cool. And I had a big smile on my face coming into the dentist, which is not always the case. So it is cool to see. It is cool to be a part of. Or maybe I am just a nerd and this is what I do professionally. So I really enjoyed seeing it in real life. It was like seeing animals in the wild instead of the zoo. So that's what a working group looks and feels like. And it is might seem sort of staid to you, but that just means that you've made it part of your routine. You've made it part of your unconscious way of doing things. And I can tell you, if that's how you operate, you are lucky. You are very lucky to be in a working group, because there's nothing wrong about being in a working group. So I'm going to ask the question again. Based on these 3 new definitions, real team, working group, team in name only, what are you a part of? Let's see if there's a big shift.
But let me ask you this as people are answering, and I'm thinking about my own situation where I'm a part of a smaller team, that's part of a larger team, that's part of a larger team. How do you want people to answer? The sort of their most close day-to-day operation?
Absolutely. Yes, that's a great question, Jeff. Yes. Again, if we come back to our original quote, think about how the word team can never be used to describe a function, an enterprise, an organization, but think how often we use that term. So it's about who are the immediate 5 to 15 people that you associate yourself with. That's a great question. Thank you for clarifying.
Sure thing. We've got just 64% of people have voted. I'll give it one more second for people who are still trying to decide. And well, let's go ahead. All right, you should see those now.
Oh, so I think we saw the change. We were about 50% at Real Team and 40% at Working Group. So we've moved previously, or of Not a Team. We've moved up a little bit, and our team of name only has gone down. Well, of course it's gone down. You're BU alumni. Why would you not employ effective ways of collaboration and communication? So apparently, as I look, there's only one of 20 who wants to hang out with us. Okay, great. So we sort of reached the turning point in the talk so far, right? I've been able to sort of share some large terms of art, and before we flip the page and say, why does this matter? I want to think about, are there any questions that Jeff have been coming up about terms that we might want to clarify or anything? Because it's lovely to share these academic principles, but until we say, well, what does this mean and why is it important? It's not making it real. So Jeff, if I could ask you or to see if there's Q&A and participants, if you want to ask any questions, we can go back to some definitions or maybe say we can apply to your certain situation, because leadership and teaming are very intimate things.
No, I'll keep an eye on the chat here. If anybody, Leon is curious how you would describe your own team at work, Ben.
Leon is Leon's a member of my team at work because he has joined and he is both a BU alumni. So Leon, I would say that we are nothing but a high-performing team, if that is in fact Leon Clark. So thank you, Leon, for making me smile.
Well, we give it another minute. As you were talking early on, you said that a team is a small group of people. And so the first thing I thought of was the fact that I kind of plan my weekend around the Patriots on Sunday. Are we using the wrong terminology there when there's 80 to 90 people on that team, or are you purely saying team from a work and business standpoint, that's sports is kind of outside of what you're really covering?
I think it's a great question. I think what I have noticed and observed is we are enamored with the concept and word team because of what we see outside of work, right? So when we say team, our hearts and minds immediately go to things like the 1980 Olympic hockey team, who overcame the Russians to win gold, the 2004 Red Sox, who overcame the Yankees to break the curse, and the 2018 Cubs that broke that curse, or 16 Cubs, whatever it was. We overuse and are enamored with the word team and the concept of teaming because we have experience outside of work, right? And there are so many wonderful lessons that you can learn about why teaming is so difficult and hard to do. I mean, if for all those of us who might have watched the last dance with the Bulls during the pandemic, to relive the glory of the Michael Jordan early and mid 90s Bulls, think about what they accomplished to come together. That was a small group of individuals who held people accountable. It was Jordan, it was Scotty. They made sure that they came to do something that no one else had ever done. That was 2 3-peats. That was winning 70 games when no one had won more than the 86 Celtics. So there's a lot that we can do, but I think we need to have we need to realize that sometimes these analogies only go so far, right? It's something that we should be mindful and thoughtful of. It's like the imagery that we like to see of posters about teamwork. Always have pictures of people rowing, because that is the idea of you need to have 8 people moving as one. But what's funny, and I rowed collegiately. I used to row. Then I had children, so I stopped rowing. Every picture of people rowing is actually a really bad form, right? So it's one of those things again where we think that this is the image of what good looks like or what great looks like. We're not applying it appropriately to our scenario. So yes, there are lessons to be learned, but let's not always be too prescriptive. So Jeff, thank you for asking, and certainly went down the rabbit hole there.
That was a great, no, that I'm glad that you had such a good answer. So excuse me, Noah has a couple of good questions built into one here. But before I ask his question, Ben, do you have any teammates named Noah that we should?
I don't have I don't have
great.
any teammates named Noah that I'm aware of. It was only the one and only Leon.
So Noah's asking, you suggest team in name only is due to poor team leader or lack of a team leader. Is that the only signifier of a team in name only? Well, let's ask that first, and then there's sort of a second part to that question.
Noah, the short answer is it depends, right? It is the easiest and most common place to start, that the leader of a team in name only is the root cause of that group's functioning in the way that it does. But we all know that leaders need followers. So I had Professor Bill Kahn at BU as we were taking a leadership class. Midway through a lecture, he goes, "It's funny. We're teaching a lecture. We're here talking about leadership and your development of leadership, but the reality is everybody in the workforce is going to be a follower. Maybe we need to have a class around followership." So that's the other side, right? Is it's a two-sided equation, and followers certainly have an enormous impact on leaders, and particularly in the work environment that we found ourselves in the last 2 years, where the paradigm of power from sort of leader and employer has shifted more and more to the employee. I'd say that the employees have more and more power. So it is both, but typically starts with the manager or leader, because it is her or his job to enable others. But that is a great question. Jeff, I think there's a part 2. Or
yeah, the part 2. No, I was thinking about this for my own situation as well. What about, Ben, the situation where you have a great leader, somebody who manages a team of 12, but those 12 folks have very much individual responsibilities, and there isn't necessarily that that collaboration that they need to do to get things done, that common purpose. Mm-hmm. Is that a working group, or is that a team when you've got that great leader?
I think it's more likely a working group, but I think it depends on the problem that you're trying to solve, right? And working groups can have phenomenal leaders. Working groups can do a wonderful job of developing those who report to them and helping them grow in their careers. But working groups do not necessarily need to function as real teams, because maybe that working group is doing activities that are a little bit more business as usual, and there might though be an opportunity for them to team. So I think it's important to share, and if I apologize if I didn't do it, none of these are completely on or completely off. There are times to team. There are times to act as a working group. And depending on the scenario that we're facing, it is important that we can shift between the two. And usually dissonance, usually tension happens is when we think that we have to team, and yet the problem is so common that it doesn't require teaming. So we're over investing our time and our emotion. We're saying, well, why are we doing these meetings? Like, because it's 5 o'clock on a Friday, and I would really like to be out with my friends or home with my family, right? It doesn't require that level of emotional commitment. Sometimes work can be left at the door. So that's another great question. Is there a part 3, Jeff, or is it just a 2-parter?
There wasn't, but Noah, great job, good questions. And a reminder, everybody, please, as Ben continues to wrap up his talk today, please feel free to put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A box, either one. I'll keep an eye on both. But Ben, let's keep going.
So the question now is why does this matter? And so in the early days of the COVID pandemic, we said, well, COVID's the root cause of all evil. COVID's the root cause of of disengagement at work. COVID's the reason that people are not commuting and trading those hours, commuting to work 12, 13, 14, 15-hour days and always on. But the reality is that COVID didn't create a problem around ways of working tensions or this confusion with teaming or working group or team in name only. It simply made it worse. So take the 2019 and 2022. Only about a third of workers are engaged at work, right? And this is using Gallup's definition of gaming, where they self-report feelings of involvement or enthusiasm about work. And that figure of about a third of American workers being engaged at work, it hasn't changed in decades. Only about a third of people are engaged at work. That's a pretty big problem. And when I work with my clients and say, well, what can we do to change engagement at work? We kind of look at three buckets. We can look at the formal buckets of work. We can look at, well, how are you organized? What are the functions that people in, what are roles and responsibilities? How are you paying people? We can look at the informal buckets of work. We can think about your culture and behaviors and relationships at work. Or we can look about your managers, right? And you can look at, because managers, your immediate reporting manager, she or he has an outsized impact on how you experience work, how you feel about work. And what happened in the pandemic, there's two really big things. Number one, active disengagement went up more, right? It went from 13 to 16. Numerically, that's not very big. It's a three percentage point jump, but that's almost a 20% increase. That's why we are seeing things around quiet quitting and all of these, and the great resignation. Active disengagement is getting up, and it has impact. Why do I hypothesize? I think it's directly linked to your managers, right? The management cohort the engagement has declined 7%. So they've gone from somewhere in the 30s now down into the 20s. That's huge. People that are supposed to be guiding and leading your work, they've been the most disengaged. They're the second most disengaged group of any surveyed, and the largest was being healthcare workers, and I think we can all surmise for obvious reasons why they were 10 plus degrees of engagement. And the biggest reason why managers were feeling disconnected was a lack of expectation. They didn't know what they were supposed to do. They were told by their managers, right? Hey, we're going virtual, or we're going to go hybrid. It's on you to figure it out. And what did they do in the early days of the pandemic? Say, well, I'm going to figure it out. What am I going to do? That little thing that was on the very center of my laptop that I had no idea what it actually was. Well, that's a camera, and I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to turn it all day. And I'm just going to make sure I'm sitting with my group, that I'm going to be there for them. And so thus, this lack of expectations has introduced the 8-hour Zoom meeting or the 9-hour Zoom meeting. And then at 5 o'clock, you said, oh, thank God, Ben has gone away. Leon, who is my teammate who joined the call, now Leon can finally get some work done, right? And that's what happened. So what did it look like? Why did managers create this problem and make it worse? In a couple of ways. Number one is that meeting bloat. It's the meeting bloat that we just talked about. It was that informal meeting, that informal collaboration that used to say, all right, well, let's just get together and let's recreate the office and have this virtual thing so we all feel connected. But it also said, well, usually meetings at work were dictated by the size of a room, right? You could only, in a 4-person conference room, you could only have 4 people, or sometimes 6 or 7 if you decided it was going to be important enough for standing room only. But when we moved to Zoom or WebEx or Teams, you could invite everybody. So then you'd have 5, 10, 15, 20 people, 30 people, 50 people on a call, and you say, well, why am I here? And you just got forwarded an invite by your manager. And you're like, well, what am I supposed to do? Should I accept it? Should I not accept it? And you felt compelled to go. So very quickly, you might have been a first-year individual contributor who felt like their job was pretty well defined, that you're going to go through this amount of work each week. Well, now you're in 20 or 30 hours of meetings every week, and you still have the same amount of work. So when's that going to get done? And now the math of a 8-hour day to a 16-hour day becomes very apparent. It also happened in this excessive use of email and chat, right? How do you know that you're on a team in name only? Think about every time that you might have gotten a chat from a report, someone who you report to, that begins with "Hi, ... are you supposed to respond to that, right? It is the most terrifying. I've learned as young consultants have come to me that said, it is the most terrifying thing if you say hi ... to me. I had no idea, right? I had no idea that that was a terrifying 2-character, and if you include the periods, 5-character phrase. But I realized that the pressure, the leaders can cast such a long shadow. Coming back now to your question, why do managers create teams and names only? It's because the shadow that they create. So I thought it was an effective use of communication, but in fact, it was an entirely ineffective use of communication. Not all people are lucky enough to work with people like myself to say, no, that didn't work. That actually scared me. So now I've stopped doing it. I might say, hi, we're not in the same office, but do you have 5 minutes to chat? It's not urgent. Can we do this? And we'll pick up the phone and talk to each other like human beings, and it's lovely. But I've learned to do that because I've listened to my colleagues to say, how can I grow and evolve as a leader? But usually managers were able to walk around and kind of look and see if someone was giving them eye contact, if they were doing a long, slow walk to go get coffee or a long, slow walk to go to the restroom to make their rounds. But now they've over-relied on chat because they don't want to disturb people, or over-relied on meeting invites. So it's hard. It makes the day work longer. And these are just some of the many ways that we can feel disconnected. So, maybe share it with the group. What are some other ways that you have said really ineffective ways of experiencing work? Do these two resonate? Are there other ones that I've missed entirely? Would love to hear some sort of ways of working gone well, or ways of working gone wrong, and then certainly want to think about ways of working gone well.
Yeah, a reminder to folks, please feel free to, if after today's talk with Ben, if you maybe aren't sure what your own situation is, feel free to type some thoughts into the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll ask those. Ben, my teammate, Bryn, wrote in with a good question. I alluded to some of the situations we have at BU, but Bryn is wondering if you can expand a little bit on some of these things you talked about. But when you've got a big team that's comprised of smaller teams, how can these smaller teams be effective in working with each other in shared goals? Mm-hmm. How do they get more connected in a hybrid world? Is that our next webinar, perhaps?
Maybe.
What can you do with this?
Maybe we're gonna get there and end on that. So maybe we should jump to the next page, and we're gonna talk to it. So, a lot of times, so what can we do? What do we do with this information? What do we do with this concept and make it real to our own lives? Because we've seen it work wrong, right? We've seen that it looks like meeting bloat. We've seen it looks like too much chat, or whatever ineffective form of communication you might be doing. But what can we do? And when I pose this question to clients, I say, well, what are you going to do about this? Typically, the answer starts with, well, I really need the communications department to send out more emails about our 3-day work hybrid policy, and that is Monday, Wednesday, Fridays are in office, and Tuesday, Thursday are at home or in office if you prefer. I'm like, okay, well, maybe, but how does that impact the IT function that we're working with, and the 300 people here and your leadership team of 6? Well, that's a great question, Ben. I know that 2 of my 6 are going to go to Manager 2.0 Academy in September, so I'm really excited about what they can do, and I think they're going to learn some really cool stuff. So great. There's nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with school, right? There's nothing wrong with going to school and learning some things. And I'm sure that'll be a great 2-day experience for them, and they're going to learn a lot. But what can you do? And like, well, what do you mean? I just gave you 2 answers, but I have to ask permission. And I'll say, well, do you? Why? And I'll say, there is an opportunity for anyone to lead when 2 or more people come together. There's an opportunity to express leadership. There's an opportunity to determine your group when 2 or more people come together. So the very first thing that we can do is have a difficult conversation and pose the question and say, how do we need to collaborate with each other, right? How does this, Jeff, in your example, how does this group of alumni connect, maybe that supports Question, need to collaborate with the School of Arts and Sciences? How do we need to collaborate with each other? Do we need to come up with something that's brand new because we've seen so much crossover between undergraduate and graduate, between arts and science and Questrom. Or maybe we just need to have a regular cadence. We're going to share information and say, here's what I'm doing, here's what you're doing. Oh, great, can I steal that template? Thank you so much. And we're gonna run that way. So it's about being very intentional about whether we need to function as a team or as a working group, and when and why. And sometimes it's going to switch, and that's okay, right? These are not forever decisions. They're very fluid relationships. The second thing that you can do is be intentional about who's at the real table or the virtual table, right? Something that has happened, and it is our desire to, this is what I conjecture is the downside of inclusivity, right? We don't want to exclude anyone from any activity, so our group sizes have become unwieldy. And we have forgotten that sometimes it's important, if you have an important thing to discuss, maybe you just need 4 or 5 people in the room, or 3 or 4 people in the room. And that's okay. Not everybody is responsible for decision making. Some people only need to be consulted or informed, right? We can use the old RACI framework, who is responsible, who is accountable, who is consulted, who is informed, right? As we've, in the age of code, we've lumped everybody together, but sometimes you only need to work with those who are going to be responsible for actually making the decision making, who are actually deciding things. So shrink your group size. Ask, do I really need to be here? Or, oh, wait, maybe I can decline this invite because it's for a meeting I really don't want to attend, and it's at 4:30 on Friday, and it's just a terrible meeting and it doesn't make sense. I have no idea why I got to it. So shrink your group size or remove yourself from the group. And third, and most importantly, we have adopted these ways of working norms that are implicit. We say, well, okay, I guess that's how we're going to do things here because that's what we decided to do, because guess what? We're bad at surfacing conflict before COVID. We're even worse during COVID. And we have gotten way, 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 way worse in this thing called hybrid. Where what do we need to do? Am I allowed to do this? And just because, right? I think about the number of stories that you hear from your colleagues who've gone back to office 5 days a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week. They say, it stinks. I sit in traffic for 3 hours total, and then I'm on Zoom calls all day because my team is in California or the people that I work with are in Switzerland. I have no idea why I'm doing what I'm doing, but I'm just following the rules. So you haven't had explicitly asked, well, does this actually apply to us and what we're trying to do here? Could we do something else? So again, these are all 3 activities. There's nothing stopping every member of this webinar from doing these 3 activities. The biggest word of advice I would have for anybody, whether you're on a team or leading a team, is start with this. Don't wait on the enterprise to save you. The enterprise cannot save you. This is not Star Trek. There's no Kirk or Spock coming, right? Your organizational leaders, your CEO, she or he cannot come and put on their superhero cape and save the day for your team. Only you can. There's some things that the organization can do to help you. Maybe they'll come out with better collaboration tools or software, but ultimately it's on you to figure out your working group norms and what's going to work best for you. And I think it starts with these 3 things, being very intentional about what is the purpose of this group and what are our norms? What are the right size of people to be in this group or in these meetings or a series of meetings? And let's talk about and make sure we talk about ways of working that we feel good about. When do we always have to be on? When are we allowed to be off? If we're coming to the office, why are we coming to the office? And you know what? Having lunch in the cafeteria on a Wednesday is a perfectly good reason to have lunch, to go to the office. But sometimes you just need to be explicit about it. So with that, it's I think we're kind of reaching the end point, and want to flip it now to the community and see if there are any other questions or thoughts that you have to share. And Jeff, let's monitor the chat, see what's come up.
Yeah, Ben, this is fantastic, and I think I'm gonna make a bunch of my colleagues watch the recording of this to help foster some great communication. So we have one question that came in from Valerie, and I've asked her to kind of clarify and elaborate for me. But if I reframe it for you, the question from Valerie was about dysfunctional teams. And I'm wondering if maybe you can even kind of walk through your last slide that had that clear model 1, 2, 3 of when you've got a really dysfunctional team that is just having disagreements that prevent them from sort of moving forward. How would you recommend using each one of these as a solution to that problem? Does that make sense?
It absolutely does.
Okay.
And so there are Valerie, you've just described the beginning of almost every team effectiveness engagement that I've ever worked on with clients. So some of the first way is call me, I'll help you out. But again, you don't need outsiders, you don't need vendors, you don't need coaches to help figure it out. There is a wonderful book called Difficult Conversations, and any difficult individual or group conversations, the author, whose name is escaping me, is kind of breaks down in 3 steps. One is asking what happened. And what happened is a question. What happened to get to the situation is a question that is an internal self-reflection question. It's also a question that we can do as a group. The second question is, well, what does that mean to me as an individual? Because sometimes things happen and maybe the dynamics are fine, but they just feel really wonky to you because they say something about you as an individual. And you're like, well, wait a minute, maybe there's some group dynamics that make me feel either really disconnected from the group, or I'm getting cast into a role that feels really different from what I signed up for, or whatever the case may be. And we test, then we ask, well, so what do we do about it? How do we create a way forward together? And so I share that framework as a way to pose these questions, right? Is we need to say, well, what happened, right? And you sometimes need to start with number 3. Let's make the implicit explicit and say, well, I don't think that we're working as effectively as I think we can, and I'm not sure why. And some of it is we just bring life into work, and there's a lot of craziness happening. And maybe that craziness could just be like the orange line is down and I'm driving to work and Boston traffic has never been worse. So I'm just bringing road rage into the office. And so on. So it's really just saying, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was bringing all of Boston traffic and somebody who cut me off on the pike into work. I'm really sorry about that. Maybe you're allowed to tell me to go take a walk around the block. The second is saying like, oh my goodness, we're meeting to death. Has anyone done the math to say how many hours of meeting that we're doing? And you sometimes forget, right? We let the calendar control us rather than the other way around. Think about how many times we've written in our calendar, say from 11:30 to 12, I'm going to write 4 emails. I'm just going to block that time off because as the calendar informs us, not the other way around. Let's take the calendar back and say, oh, wait, I'm spending 24.5 hours a week in meetings with these people that and half of those 12 hours aren't people on my team. We gotta recalibrate. Let's shrink the group size, shrink the time as meetings. And then you can ask that bigger question of saying, well, we keep talking about these words to work together, but maybe there's some better norms that we can think about, right? I talk a lot with clients about, well, what's the price of admission for a meeting? And they're like, what do you mean by that? Well, so if you say we're meeting you to death, then why? And I say, well, think about your meetings that are on your calendar. Do they have an agenda? No. Do they have decisions needed? No. They have this? Like, no. Well, do they have a problem you're trying to solve? No. Well, then flip it around. Say, I will tell the people that you work with, I'm not going to accept a meeting unless there is one of all the following: purpose, agenda, decisions needed, right? Flip that around. And if it's purpose, you're like, oh, we need to solve a problem. Maybe that means we need to focus our energy around real teaming. If it's decisions needed or information sharing, well, maybe that means I'm going to have a mindset more of a working group, and I can be a little bit less emotionally invested and more just, yeah, here's what I'm working on. Do you need it? Sure. Let me email the file. Boom, boom, boom. Go that way. So that was a really long-winded answer, but it's a big way. It's a big question.
It's a huge question, and so I don't think you need to worry about being long-winded on that, Ben. I appreciate you taking it on. You had mentioned a book, Difficult Conversations. I haven't heard of that, but I'll make sure to look that up and share that info with everybody in my little wrap-up email that I send. And you should probably connect with the author and see if you can get a cut from any proceeds from sales. Excuse me. We've got two people who asked a really interesting question that just didn't occur to me. And that is basically, I'm going to sort of summarize Mike and the question in the chat here. What the impact of bringing new people into the equation and people leaving organizations has, and what your thoughts are on how people can best manage that.
Yep.
The person who asked in the chat is a newer manager, so new to having to lead a team. So are there best practices within your sort of teaming model
Sure.
that people should do as people arrive and exit the organization?
Yeah, and I think they are similar questions yet highly different. So I'm going to answer in two different ways. So let's go with a newer manager first, right? Maybe a new manager is leading an existing team, or a new manager has been asked to form a new team. Either way are kind of the solution would be the same. The new manager, she or he needs to have a vision for what is this group of people going to do, right? So it's incumbent upon them to say, well, what is a problem that we're trying to solve, or what is the business that we're trying to just keep afloat, right? That helps figure out, are we a working group or a team? That's a really important decision-making process. And next is, well, what is our meeting and information relationship cadence? And that's number 3. That's about making implicit ways explicit. And that can be really hard. But if you want to be effective, you say, well, here's the best way that I like to work. I like to work collaboratively. I like to work in meetings. Sometimes if you can just say, here's the purpose of the meeting and we're going to do this, I don't need everything fancy. They say, great. And that person might say, that's my exact working style. They might say, I am not working like that. I'm actually more of a thinker and a processor rather than someone who thinks out loud. Would it be okay if we work asynchronously? Would it be okay if we go back and forth on email? Say, sure. It's going to take some time, but it's now you're making group and individual expectations very implicit or explicit. And that's really the goal of any new team. It's about what is my role, being very intentional about what is the role of the manager, what is the role of each employee, and what is the role that this group of people are going to do, and making sure that you're kind of dedicating the space and time to talk about it regularly. As you think about the times of cycling folks in and off of groups, maybe it's a new member left and maybe they left for a reason, or maybe they didn't, who knows? Sometimes just opportunities present themselves. It's really focusing on number 3, right? You might have a group of 6 and you've got 5 people who've been together for 4 or 5 years. They know how to act, they know how to work. Those who are married, think about, or those who've met, your significant others, parents or family, think about how awkward those first meetings can be, because you don't know the rules of engagement, right? You don't know what are the group dynamics? Why are we supposed to laugh at grandpa's off-color jokes? Or are we supposed to tell him that's not how the world operates anymore, right? Think about the way is this playful sibling rivalry, or is there's a real beef between brother and sister? You don't know, right? It's the same thing, but a little bit different at work, because maybe the emotional stakes are lower. It's, how are you supposed to work? Are we supposed to work live? Or are we supposed to work asynchronously? Are we serious? Do we like to banter? Things about that. So it's really about saying, here's the roles and responsibilities of people on the team. Here's how we think you fit in. Here's how we think you might fit into those who departed. But we also know we hired you or brought you in for a reason. And here's what we're hoping to add to you. And here's how we tend to operate. Does that work for you? Or does it not work for you? So again, it's just being very deliberate about how do you want to function and having those difficult conversations.
Ben, this is fantastic. We got folks chiming in the chat to let you know how much they appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And somebody who wanted to let you know what a beautiful family you have. I agree. I'm curious. So, you and I, you shared with me an article that you had written about this. I'm going to make sure to send that to everybody as well, so they can dive a little bit deeper. There's some fascinating research and suggestions of new terminology from me. Can you share, I know you're particularly passionate about this. Where do you see this going for you? What's like the next step of the work that you're going to do in this area? What I love about this work is, as much as, for example,
technology progresses or work dynamics change, or we figure out new hybrid, where we talk a lot about what does it mean to lead in a hybrid world. Well, guess what? 5 years ago, we were talking about what does it mean to lead in a global world. Before that, I was what does it mean to lead in a VUCA world? Now we're on to VUCA Prime. So the framing always changes, but the solutions are always the same, right? People are people. People are social. They crave connection. And so what this work does, and what I love doing about it is, it is helping individuals and team and groups and organizations figure out how to build better and more effective relationships. And the environment always changes, the presenting problems always change, but if you think that the recommendations feel a little rudimentary and basic, yes, they are. But simple is very hard. Basic is very hard. And if we were to do a better job of getting back to basics, I guarantee work would suck a little bit less. We'd see those engagement scores maybe pop into the 40s, God forbid, rather than hovering around 33%.
Well, Ben, I really think that you've offered quite a service to our alumni and students around the world today, and helped people make a difference at their organizations. And so it's really a gift that you've given all of us. So thank you so much for your time. You made kind of a joke earlier about if people are having struggles to call you. But I want to give you a chance to say more about how you can help people, or at the very least, I know that you're still using your BU email address that I can share with folks. But do you want to
sure,
let them know about how they can follow up?
Absolutely. I do this professionally, but I am sharing my @bu.edu email. It's still active. I don't know why it's still active, but it's still active. It's still get email. We are all connected by being members of the alumni community. And I am deeply indebted to BU, to the Question School of Management, for helping me make a really important transition from the public sector to the private sector, and could not have done that without 2 years in the MBA program. So if you ever want to talk, I'm here. Please shoot me an email, find me on LinkedIn. It is part of the connective tissue of the BU alumni community, and always happy to talk through issues that you're facing, or sometimes it just helps to bring a second person into the conversation you've been having in your head for some time. So I'd be happy to continue the conversation in some format.
Oh, thanks again, Ben, and I really appreciate that. I want to thank everybody who joined us for today. I specifically want to thank those of you who, like Ben, have supported the university, particularly with your time and expertise, but also your dollars. So thank you for supporting BU. I want to make sure also, all of you, if you haven't already, please make sure you join BU Connects. That's our official online networking and mentoring platform just for members of the BU community. It's an amazing way to make professional connections and other connections with people from the BU sphere. And then lastly, I hope you all think about joining us. Our next career webinar is coming up next Tuesday, September 20th. We're going to be offering the 4 steps to creating an elevator pitch that aces interviews. Sure to be another great one. So thanks, everybody. And again, thank you so much, Ben. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a great day or a great evening, wherever you might be, folks. Take care.